Welcome. We're here for chapter 11 of She Who Is.
This has been a journey. This is the second to last chapter.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a full summer's project for us.
Exactly. A whole summer project and lots of opportunities to expand our thinking and deepen our thinking, and also hopefully not just our thinking, but our heart experience, because as we were saying before we hit go live, theology needs to not just stay in the head. That's where a lot of it happens. But then if it doesn't come into the heart and body, then it's not much good. So,
Yes. Yes. Well, I've just
yeah.
really enjoyed sitting at the feet of this author, Elizabeth
Mhm.
Johnson. We talk a lot about, with feminist theology, like we need these older women who have gone before us who kind of represent this like wisdom bearer. And yes, so she's on like another level. And this chapter really reveals just how deep. I mean, I was saying to Annie before we got on, like trying to make such abstract theology
Uh-huh.
come to life and make this relatable. Um, I think it's a challenge, but I feel I've mostly read it yesterday, and I had a chance to sleep on it. And when I was praying this morning, I have like a little spot where I always go in the morning, and I sit next to the river and just kind of watch the water and try to meditate. And yeah, I just felt like all of this abstract, like big thoughts kind of came and distilled in that space. So I'm excited to try to
Ooh.
relate what this means in our world. But so yeah, so she's basically getting into this question, which is a kind of a theological question, from ancient times, of what is the relationship between God and the world?
Yeah.
And specifically, like, is God in the world and is God infused in creation, or is God somehow separate
Yeah.
from the world?
That
And
is the question, right?
that's
Like,
our big question for this chapter.
yeah. And I'm so excited to hear you talk about how that came from, the cerebral area where we're first reading this and grappling with these very abstract concepts and all of these theological terms, which is so funny because I'm toward the end of my degree in theology now, and I still feel like, oh, I'm maybe a kindergartner here in this playground, right? It's just like there's so much to learn. And I'm so excited to hear you say, well, it got into your body as you're in
Yeah.
nature in quiet contemplation. I think
Yeah.
um, that's the intent of any good theologian, is that this would not just stay intellectual. This is not an intellectual pursuit. This is the
Yeah.
whole self.
Yeah. Well, and it connected for me, I think. I mentioned this to you. I've been reading Braiding Sweetgrass,
Yeah.
which is sort of like a reflection on indigenous spirituality,
Mhm.
and especially about it's written by a botanist who is indigenous, and so she has a way of thinking about botany from a very spiritual perspective. And so this concept of if God is God in the world becomes really concrete for me when I think about, like, when I'm sitting by the river, and I'm thinking about so many traditions that have looked to, sorry, looked to like rivers specifically, but all kinds of aspects of creation have seen divinity within them.
Yeah.
And so that becomes very concrete to me because I find it hard to pray when I'm not surrounded by like the natural world and creation. That part for me is like bringing divinity nearer
Yeah.
to me. And
Yeah.
so I really resonate a lot with this idea that God is in the world, God is infused into creation.
Yep.
But then, Dr. Johnson talks about how that's actually a spirituality called like pantheism,
Mhm.
which I think early Christianity has been like, no, like
Ah!
very, no, that's pagan. I don't know what all the words are for it, but
Any word to say, here's where we are and that's where they are, and we don't go there, because the fear is if we go there, if we wander into that territory, we will be contaminated with the evil or sickness or separation or sin or whatever word they want to use for that, which is fascinating because I think we've talked about this here at Friday Feminary before. And I just noticed before I logged on, Father Joash Thomas, do you know this guy?
mm,
You'll love him. Is doing a live tomorrow morning that I'm really excited to listen in on
mm,
about Saint Augustine and his fear that we will be contaminated by the world, right?
mm,
And I think that's the gist. That was my understanding of what the title was. In fact, I'm going to look this up while I'm talking so that if anybody wants to join, I think this is going to be really kind of fantastic to explore this, because she's also talking a lot about this concept right now. What is happening with theology today, actually, we can trace back to Augustine. Yeah, Father Joash Thomas is going live tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, decolonizing Augustine's theology of disgust with
mm,
Dr. Sid Sudiacal. I'm not familiar with this person, but anyway, um, and I think I've brought this term in here that I've been introduced to in my studies. Um, there is a theology of disgust that we have. It probably stems from Augustine and maybe back before him, where if we are around something that is in any way contaminated with sin, separation, sickness, whatever you want to call it, evil, that it will get into us, right?
mm,
And I remember in college being in a conversation about like, well, who are we friends with? Looking around, we're all kind of the same kind of person. Why is that? And one of the girls in our circle actually said, well, as my dad always said, if you run with the pigs, you'll smell like the pigs,
mm,
right? That visceral fear that if I go into a space where we don't agree or whatever, what they have will get on me.
mm,
The term that I am learning to love is the antidote to that fear, and it is eucontamination. And this is a term that's recently been put into the theological discussions I've been privileged to hear and read about. EU contamination, that Greek prefix EU meaning good. So if you think about like
mm,
words that begin with the prefix "u," like Eucharist or eulogy, or there's a whole bunch, but those are the ones coming to my
yeah,
mind. It means the good, whatever, right? Eucharist, the good feast; eulogy, the good speech. Um,
mm,
so eucontamination is, I think, what Jesus showed us how to do, walking into a situation, not fearing, not having disgust about what they have that might get on me, but knowing that what abides in me, the light, the well that never runs dry, actually will get onto whoever I am in contact with.
mm,
So it's like reverse. It's the opposite of disgust. Let me walk into whatever space carrying the kingdom of heaven that is within,
mhm,
and know with full confidence that the spirit will be doing her thing here and working in her way, and I don't have to be worried about being contaminated because I am a source of light and goodness here. So it's sort of
mm,
the antidote to that fear.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you think about how that kind of the fear of being contaminated would extend to God, like if God is related to the world and the world is sinful, then what does that mean about God being
Mm,
contaminated from that worldview? So you kind of, but yeah, like historically on the in the Western way of thinking, it has been this separation. Like God is other
mhm,
and is not contaminated by the world. But
right.
what I think this feminist theology is the spirit is in the world, infusing the world with goodness.
Yes.
You contaminate it.
It
Such a
is you contamination.
and it gives
Yeah.
I mean, it gives God so much more power. I mean, it's if you think like you have to keep God separate so that God's not contaminated. Like that doesn't speak to almighty or omnipotence at all.
And I really want to mostly listen to what your thoughts are here because I feel like that's going to be the meat of this conversation, if a vegetarian slash vegan could say that. But let me bring this in and throw this in the pot, and then maybe just listen to what happened to you today. I think part of the issue here that people are afraid of um, is what if God in some way needed us? What if God had needs? Because right at the beginning of this chapter, it's laid out that Aquinas is like, no, God doesn't have real relation to us. God exists wholly other and apart from us, just happens to care about us or maybe love us in whatever way he's able to express that. But the distinction that I think Augustine was really trying to make is like, God does not need us. Like, do not think that we are so important that God has need of us.
Mhm.
And I thought, as a mother, I would look at this so differently. And so here's what I wrote in my journal regarding his no real relation concept.
Mhm.
I wrote, a mother does not need her children in order to survive, like in a biological sense, right? We know mothers can live apart from their children, and for many reasons, many of us end up doing so. She can live in isolation from them and even continue to exist if they do not. Okay. But how she will not be well without them.
Mhm.
Although
Mhm.
she does not need them in a biological sense, she will never feel whole without right relation with her children, right? Like, I don't believe that we can be whole without being somehow connected to, however it works out, to our children. And like I would never feel okay, whole, complete if my children were elsewhere or didn't exist or I didn't have relation with them.
Mhm.
I could keep living. And so in that sense, yes, I don't need them. But in order to be complete, I definitely need them in that sense. And
Yeah.
so I'm wondering if perhaps God is not so different. And the fear that I think Aquinas was tapping into when he's writing all of these things and setting us on this trajectory of like God is out and other and doesn't need us, is that what if, I think the fear is that God is dependent upon us. And then we have
Mhm.
thing that we know intrinsically we're not capable of satisfying God's needs. And so we feel so scared that what if, but I think that is maybe an attachment problem. And maybe the
Mhm.
psychologist could weigh in here because we're afraid to be needed because what if we fall short? But maybe
Mhm.
there is a better way of looking at this entirely. And I think it starts with, at least for me, it starts with my concept of motherhood. So,
Yeah. That feminine imagery definitely, I mean, and that's kind of where she takes it at the kind of middle of the chapter. She says, if you use male metaphor, male imagery, it makes sense that you would kind of think of the otherness, right? But if you think of the way that a mother actually has a child inside of her, like she makes space inside of her own body so that creatures can live and move and have their being
mm,
completely surrounded by God. And so this concept of like God being related to the world as a mother is related to the child in her womb, like surrounding, yes, other, yes, greater than, yes, like completely beyond,
yes.
and tied together in a way that's it's intrinsic. It's and very and yeah, needful in some ways for completeness.
Mhm.
So yes,
Mm.
she's just kind of hammering on this idea consistently through every chapter of just how like how male and female imagery do different things to our minds and our concepts of relatedness. And yeah, so and my I think, kind of tying it back into like the whole indigenous spirituality piece, right? So if God is, represented well in that imagery of being of the world in a way that is very connected, we begin to kind of appreciate nature, creation, all that is, as an extension of her body.
Yes.
And so I was writing this, I do my monthly essays on Substack, and I was kind of talking about a practice of just like finding ways to consume the earth, like to be connected of what the earth offers us in terms of our nourishment. This is really, this whole thing is coming straight out of that Braiding Sweetgrass book, which is talks so much about like how different specific plants are so designed to nourish our bodies.
Mhm.
So I wrote, this is kind of, I haven't published this yet, but this is what I was
Oh,
thinking about. Those who live off the land don't bow to money or employment or rent payments, but they only bow to the one who nurtures all living things through her body.
mm,
Birds and squirrels are completely free and yet totally dependent.
mhm,
Modern humans cannot replicate that level of dependence. But we don't have to forget it entirely. We can remind ourselves of what it was like to taste her goodness, to bring her body into our own, and how much gratitude when we experience when we understand that it is her body, the
mm,
earth, that nourishes us.
mm, mm,
And I think like that idea would just totally radically transform the way we interact,
yeah.
with the world. And the way that we revere rather than extract and exploit. So
Mm,
that's kind of a piece of it for me, is just that shift in perspective of
mm,
and I what so one of the other practices that I feel like coming straight out of Braiding Sweetgrass again is like this idea of like asking permission to use the resources of the earth,
mhm.
having that posture.
Right. The posture of reverence that I learned, I think we've talked about this here too. You know, it's particularly Western folk are so fascinated with the concept of faith, right? Like and having belief in something that cannot be seen. And what I'm learning from my juxtaposition with indigenous theology and philosophy and art and science and all the things is that we could talk about faith all day long if we want, but we could also just really dig into reverence,
Mm,
which is right here available right now and requires no, sometimes, especially my situation has been such that faith requires willing suspension of disbelief.
mhm,
And sometimes I'm able to do that, and sometimes there's a part of me that's like, let's not get duped, right? Let's not get sucked into something that's untrue. And I've got this like maybe it's an accountant in my brain or a risk manager, but somebody's like crunching the data and going like, this is risky. Let's not do it. But reverence requires none of that effort. It just requires walking up to something living or some mineral and seeing just like having a moment of awe with it. And this does not mean, to all the people who might be really worried here, this does not mean bowing to a rock and saying you are God necessarily. I mean, that is a way of being, and for many folks that's a beautiful way of being, but much more accessible to folks like me with the Christian roots, just being here with this rock, with this tree, just allowing my spirit to just be here and not needing to know all of the answers, but just having reverence is so freeing and so it- somehow opening in a
mhm,
way that the intellectual pursuit of my faith is not.
yeah. And when you have that, yeah, so when you have this separation, like God is somehow separate or other, it's like, yeah, you can't, it's invisible. You can't see it. You have to have faith to be able to experience that relationship. But when you think of this like this kind of fusion of God and the world, then it's all real. It's all everything that is in your, can be an expression of that. And it doesn't really, yeah, it doesn't require that leap of faith. It's just all
Sort of
there right
like
in front of you.
sort of like a fetus being inside mother's womb and saying, I don't know everything about she who is bearing me, right? I don't know her history. I don't know who she is. but oh, I'm being nourished through this cord. I'm being held in this fluid. I hear her heartbeat. These things I can just experience, just allow my five senses. Maybe we have more. Maybe fetuses in the womb experience more senses, however many senses. Maybe I can let them tell me something true and remind me
Mm,
of my belovedness.
yeah.
Do you see this comment here? This is coming from a friend who's another student with me at St. Stephen's, bringing in Dr. Will Gaffney's translation. Have you ever come across Will Gaffney's work?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you'll love her. She's a gorgeous womanist theologian, and she re-engages with the word and puts it in feminist terms
Mm.
often. So Psalm 68:11, the author of life gave the word, author of life in all caps. The women who proclaim the good news are a great army. Mm.
We're doing it. We're trying to do it anyway. Translating these theologians into plain language is a way of spreading the
Mhm.
word.
Mm.
But yeah, there in Braiding Sweetgrass, she talks about her daughters learning. She was kind of experimenting with making maple syrup, and this is an image of like how we can get reconnected to this reverence for the earth that
Mhm.
points to the nourishment and like the connectedness of our relationship with the God of all creation. So
Mm.
she talks about me tapping the trees, like you tap a little spigot basically into the trees, and what it does when the sap starts to run, there's like a little bit of water that like trickles out from the tree down this little spigot. Obviously it goes into a bucket normally, but her girls when they were young would go up to the spigot and just kind of like put their mouths up against it, and it just gave her this picture or this image of like being nursed essentially by these trees. And it
Mhm.
reminded me of a couple years ago, my son and I were exploring on a beach and we found a coconut tree. And of course, we had to try to get a coconut, like a fresh coconut ourselves, but we couldn't figure out how to get it open. Once we finally got it down, we were like trying to get it open. So we're like smashing it against a rock and trading back and forth, just like the coconut is like completely pressed against our
Yeah.
face and drinking this. Just, I mean, coconut water is so good for your body. It's
Yeah.
incredibly nourishing. You just can feel night and day, like at before and after. You just
Mm.
physically feel different after you drink it. And, it just, again, it just has this very visceral image of like you're drinking from this like round,
Mhm.
which I'm sure people would feel a little bit squeamish of. I'm sure Thomas Aquinas would feel super squeamish about that kind of imagery. But I just, yeah, I think that there is something about, and of course, on our day to day basis, it's very hard. We live in a modern world, and we go to the refrigerator and we pull out a carton of milk, and it's just different, right? We're not
Mhm.
drinking directly from a tree or the fruit of a tree very often. But I think there is something about creating practices in our lives and just being intentional and conscious about the way we receive any resource,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like eating a kale salad right now, and just this appreciation and gratitude that like and I think it helps to put into perspective like all the things that you and I are both dealing with on a daily basis, of
Yeah.
all the hardships. But somehow if you can step back from that and see the bigger picture, like we are being nourished daily. We are alive because of her goodness.
It just seems so obvious now, particularly after spending time really immersing myself in the book of John, which I'll put this out there now, I think was written by a woman. I think it was Mary Magdalene, but that's a whole other thing. I can't
Mm.
substantiate that at this point. I'd probably need a PhD, and I'm not sure if I want to do that. But anyway, reading through
One
the book
step
of
at a
John,
time, Annie, one step at a time.
right? Exactly. We'll see where this takes me. Um, but I just had this feeling the last time I read through it for a Christology class, just like, oh, there's such a feminine spirit coming through here. So anyway, when Jesus in the book of John uses so much feminine imagery about the divine, right? Starting starting in number one, the just the word being at the very beginning of all things. But then when he's talking with Nicodemus and you've got to be born again, like that is the most feminine imagery a person. What is the one thing that we can all agree that only females do? It's give birth. That's like the one thing that we can all say that is always feminine. Um,
Mhm.
and then when he is sharing the Last Supper with the disciples, he says, "This is my body broken for you. Take and eat. Here is my blood poured out for you. Take and eat." This is such a corporeal experience, being nourished by literally the body of Christ. Can we see that in the context of God, our mother, nourishing us with her body through the kale in your salad, through the sap those young children are drinking straight from the tree? Can we see how God nourishes us with her body for the love of it, for the love of keeping us alive and being in relationship with us? It's so beautiful.
It is. It is. But yeah, and I think there's something, unfortunately, about men and not wanting to be dependent on a mother. Like there's something about masculinity that they're resisting this connection.
Oh. What do you think that's about? I would love let's go there.
I mean, I just think that we have associated that stage of life of infancy with weakness.
Mhm.
And men, in order to have a sense of identity that is masculine, cannot be weak. And so, any association of the being dependent on a mother, that's in harkening back to a childhood of
Mhm.
vulnerability and weakness, unfortunately. And so, there's just this. Um, and I think it really, and maybe, I mean, it may translate into just the vulnerability that they feel around women in a more, like equal relationship of,
Mhm.
there's so much vulnerability in desiring a woman. And I don't know. I just think it's complex, and um, I think it helps attribute why we don't regard God as mother, because I think it just makes men very uncomfortable.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the word vulnerability here is central because to have a need makes anyone vulnerable because there is something that without that thing, you cannot continue to exist in your state. And so, for any of us to exist with a need for protection, nourishment, care, companionship, whatever, leaves us vulnerable because if that need is not met, then what? And so I've been here a lot in my contemplation recently. What is it about vulnerability that's so terrifying, particularly to men? Not specifically only to men, because everyone experiences this on some level. But why did men, starting with Aquinas and or Augustine, what I always confuse the two. I've probably said the wrong one. Anyway, starting with the men way, 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 way back, why is it not okay for God to have need of us? And why is it not okay for us to have need of one another, of the earth, of God, and the willingness? Why have we not been willing to see femininity as equally powerful and necessary to masculinity? I think this is all because vulnerability leaves us open. And if we cannot control or guarantee the outcome, then we stand to lose something. And that is frightening. I think this is probably the core of the issue. It's scary to have needs. It's why
Mhm.
we wrote who was it that wrote the story? Is it Robinson Crusoe, where he's a man who doesn't need anybody, right? He just lives all on his own. And I've
Mm.
had so many theologians point out to me that that unfortunately exemplifies what theology for the last, 1,000, 2,000 years has looked like in much of Christianity because we revere this standalone guy who doesn't need because to need is frightening.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, and there's this, the whole idea that our lives are just full of, I don't know if you, I mean, I don't know. You kind of mentioned like you're going through a lot of hardship right now, challenges and difficulties, as am I. And I feel very needy. I feel, but I think that there's this tendency I feel in myself to withdraw and almost feel like all of these things that are happening that are going wrong in my life are evidence of a God who is not there.
Mm.
I think that's deep. I think that goes real deep. It's really hard to pick that apart and to replace that with this theology that would say, God is with you in your suffering because God suffers. Like, if God is connected to the world in an infused way, then God experienced the suffering of the world.
Yeah.
If God is other and above and doesn't get all messy down here with us, then when we go through really hard things, it's like there's a distance there. It feels like, um, yeah, that we're in it by ourselves. I think
Mhm.
what this image of God as mother surrounding us, encompassing us, and like really embodying our own suffering. And I think that's what Christ did too. I mean, that's the beauty of
Absolutely.
Christ, is that we have a person who came in a very specific form in a specific time in history to basically reveal this truth that like the hard things that we deal with in life, we're not dealing with on our own. Like God is suffering right alongside of us in it and
Co-suffering love.
co-suffering. Yeah.
So the term that I have heard over and over in the course of the last few years, but never connected. This is so funny. I have been listening for and trying to find this term again, and it finally showed up here, not in any of the other books that I've read in my theology classes. So interesting. Um, for what we're trying to express is panentheism,
Oh,
not
yes.
pantheism, where God is the rock, but where God is in all because she has created all. So she is present everywhere. And like the psalmist says, there's nowhere I could go where you're not. I could ascend to the heavens or the depth of the sea, and behold, thou art there. And God is extends beyond that which we are able to experience and know. In the same way that a mother extends beyond where her baby is embedded in her belly, and yet there is no separation, yet she is greater than the baby's experience of her. And as you and I know as mothers, our children will continue to develop their understanding of who we are as humans for their entire lives. And after we're gone, they will still continue to wonder about us and hopefully make um, experiences, that's not what, discoveries about who we were that will continue to help them build the picture.
Mhm,
And so, in the same way, God is in all things
mhm.
and greater still in some way we cannot express because we don't have words for what is beyond the universe
Yes,
as we can observe it.
yes. Panentheism,
Panentheism,
not to be confused with pantheism. So,
right, right.
yeah, yeah. And this, as you were talking, I was just thinking about, like, I think I'm just so charmed by these stories when people talk about their mothers, later in life, or maybe they've discovered, like you were saying, they have these discoveries about who they were. I remember an interview with somebody on a podcast where she had written letters back and forth with her mother throughout her life. And so and then she kind of came upon like a trove of letters that her mother had written and received throughout her life. And just this idea, I think that um,
Yeah,
just that uniqueness, especially when it comes from men who I was just watching my favorite show last night. The culminating episode of the season is called Alone, and it's about these people who, I love this idea of living off the land. So it's a snapshot into people who live off the land totally by themselves. And it's so interesting just to hear their inner monologue as they're kind of reflecting on their lives. And he was talking about his mother and just the ways that she had imparted lessons in his life that really stood the test of time. And he attributed his success on the show. He actually won the whole competition and attributed a lot of it to the ways his mother had kind of given him these lessons in life and modeled certain things to him. So it's a sweet, I think it's a sweet reflection of how human, like, juxtaposed to some other kind of ways of seeing women that's a little bit more diminished, in our stature and our, way that we're reflected as images of God. So these stories of people really reminiscing on their mothers, I think, are a snapshot into what it's like for us to have that connection with God as mother.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
it really is. Wow. This is a beautiful conversation. Is there any
Yes,
okay.
I do hope that as more and more men can just be like, why do I have to like reject this bond? Like that they can kind
Yeah,
of see that as a really profound, sustaining relationship that could extend to their theology.
yeah. And just to know it's okay. Come out, just come out into the deep end of this pool. You're welcome to have needs, and you will be looked after. You will not be destroyed or disintegrated because you have needs. Um, that's that's the separation talking. It's okay to move past that.
Yeah.
Um, do you have anything final to bring in? I want to read this one sentence that I really want to highlight, and then I think we can put a bow on
Well,
this.
yes. So Colette talked about how she starts preaching at various points. So Elizabeth Johnson starts preaching in each of her chapters.
Yeah.
And I think the one that I had underlined one too. So I'll share mine and then you share yours. But she
Okay.
says, okay, she's referring to the burning bush story with Moses. And she says, the light of the biblical burning bush narrative adds precision to the one who speaks. There's a mystery in a personal key, pouring out compassion, promising deliverance,
Mm,
galvanizing a human sense of mission toward that end, symbolized by fire
mm,
that does not destroy. This one will be known by the words and deeds of liberation and covenant. She
mm,
who is the one whose very nature is sheer aliveness, is the profoundly relational source of being of the whole universe. Anyway, she goes on, but
mm.
her, she just has a way of elevating this in a,
Profoundly
yeah, poetic.
relational source. I love that.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be discovered with the burning bush. Recently, when I was at school, someone was talking about it, and I tried to draw it in my book in my journal. Like, it's really interesting to try to draw a bush that's on fire but not being consumed. And somebody
Mhm.
said, the miracle of the burning bush was not that the bush was on fire and not being consumed, but that Moses was given to see the bush in its actual state, that all of creation is alive with the fire of God, and that
Mm,
Moses was allowed to view that right there. And that was the miracle,
wow.
which I love to tie into my question about the light in Genesis 1, when God says, let there be light, and then there's light. But then the stars and moon and sun are not brought in till the fourth day. So what was the light? I like to think it's that fire.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. It's the livingness of God in creation.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
aliveness,
The
the
aliveness.
fire that burns in our hearts.
Hmm.
Well, here is where I would leave us. Elizabeth, in addition to preaching impassioned messages. She also drops really savory questions to chew on. So I'll just leave us with this one. She's talking about pantheism. She says this is, I'll just read back a little bit. Further light is shed on pantheism's intelligibility by an imaginative exercise dear to philosophers. Okay, I'm listening. I love imaginative exercises. Imagine the infinite and the finite together. Although, granted, the infinite is unimaginable. So already we can't do this exercise, but try. Where should one draw the line that divides them? To draw such a line would be to delimit what is infinite, and it would then not be infinite at all. To transpose this example into theology, here's the question: where is the line that separates God and the world? If we draw that line, then we have limited the infinite. Yeah.
And when I read that, Annie, I thought of your quote that you closed with last week, which was God is a circle whose circumference is nowhere. So there's no line, like there is no line.
Whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought of when I read that.
Yeah.
There is no line, there is no boundary.
There is no line. She is here in every breath, right here in the space between all of us, whether we're in the same room or across continents. There's no distinction, no boundary. We're all just here in God together.
And she's experiencing all of these, the string of bad luck and all these bad things that it can like, it's just the nonstop. She is experiencing all of it.
Yep.
All of it with
All of
us. So blessed be she who is.
Blessed be she who is. And all of us, thank you to those of us joining us now and or later. We love you. And we will meet up again for She Who Is chapter 12.
The last
Hopefully
one.
and then we'll share with you what book we're tackling next. I have
Yeah.
still in the works.
I'm excited. Send recommendations if you have any suggestions for those of you out there. If you want to do a Friday Feminary and you have a good book that you think is going to blow our minds, we're in.
Absolutely. And if you'd like to join us on the chat, on the conversation, we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. Be so well.
Right.
Much love.
Good chatting.
Okay, bye.
Bye.